Welcome to the Databricks Skill Builder series. We're glad you're here. All right, thanks everybody for joining. Today, our guest is Ron Joy. He's also a solution architect here at Databricks, and he's going to be talking about centers of excellence and data culture enablement. Thanks so much for coming today, Ron. And if you have any questions, feel free to drop them into the Q&A box. And if you have a question that would be better asked out loud, feel free to raise your hand, and when appropriate, we'll unmute you so that you can ask your question.
Thank you, Stephanie. Hello, everyone. Thank you for your time. Really appreciate it. Today we're going to cover centers of excellence and kind of this broader methodology of data culture enablement, specifically how we can use some of these processes and tools at our disposal to take a realistic approach on data mesh ideals, right? I'll go into that a little bit deeper with an overview of kind of just what is data mesh real quick, and then talk about, okay, how as an organization, how as individuals, how as CEOs, how as data engineers, how as data scientists, what are some of the steps that we can take to enable a data culture throughout our organization? Because it's incredibly important, right? Tools are only a portion of the equation when we're talking about providing value to our organizations, to our businesses, right? So, it's people, process, and tools, right? So we're going to talk about a little more about some of the process pieces. Of course, the tools are important that we use as well, and having the appropriate people in the right places. But when you get all three working together, you can really build some awesome things, right? A little bit about me, my background. I am a solution architect here at Databricks. I am in our manufacturing vertical. Specifically our DV500 version of that. So think large enterprises. I have 10 years of experience working with large enterprises, doing big data platform deployments, modern data culture processes, building out governance models, really focused on how can we get our data to the people who need it? How can we get our business users the appropriate data sets that they need, the analytics that they need? How can we upskill even our business users to have more technical skill set so they can kind of bridge that gap too, so that we're not, maybe they have some deep domain knowledge, we can upskill them with technology to help them out. So my background's really deep into a lot of the process, into a lot of the big platform pieces, into the cultural pieces, into the really, really important process pieces. All right, so again, quick overview of data mesh. We're not gonna go super deep into data mesh, but did just want to make sure that everybody's familiar with it real quick. It's the hot topic right now. Everybody's kind of talking about it. So brief overview here. Data mesh is a series of 4 principles, essentially, right? The idea here is to have domain-oriented, decentralized data ownership and architecture. What that means is you have finance over here, HR over here, marketing over here. Each one of those are a domain typically. But it can really be anything, right? It could be all of those fit in their own domain, or maybe it's an external customer that's a domain, right? Which leads us to topic number 2. Our data is a product, right? It's an internal product and it's an external product, right? Data is the most valuable thing that most organizations own, so productize it. Treat it like a piece of software. Treat it like a thing that you have, right? That you would go buy in a store. Treat your data as a product, right? The next piece is really, really important when we talk about enablement here. It's self-service. People shouldn't have to go find out how to do things on their own. We should make it really, really, really easy for them to do things. That's going to stop them from creating shadow IT, and it's going to enable them to solve their business needs, right? This one's really key when we talk about security and enablement, when we talk about governance. The number of times if you don't have self-service, people are going to go do it on their own. And their own way of doing things is either going to be expensive, going to be insecure, or it's going to be completely off the beaten path. Once you get enough of those built up to, you have 40 different standards. You have 100 different standards. When you have multiple standards, you have no standards, right? So really, really important to give people what they need in an easy way, give them some paved path. The last piece here is federated computational governance, and that's around making sure that we have a governance model in place, right? So all of this is to make sure that we can scale, right? one workload, easy enough. Right? You can build out a process to build out a single workload and approach it and have a cool pilot and a cool MVP, and then provide a ton of value to the business, and the business loves it, and it's great. But then how do we do that again? And again, and again, and again, and again, and again, right? Managing all of those at scale becomes a little bit more complicated. We're going to come into that here in a second. Just want to cover from a high level. We're not going to go super deep into this, but Databricks has capabilities in place to enable all of the data mesh concepts, right? Open, flexible architecture, the ability to deploy the platform with Terraform, use DevOps models to do infrastructure as code and ML ops and all these cool things for the self-service pieces. Treating your data as a product means keeping everything open source, means having the auditability on top of it, means having all of the capabilities from a warehousing side, but also as a data lake side to do your all of your workloads from reporting to machine learning. And then, of course, the ever important governance models with Unity Catalog, and just having deep, and wide governance capabilities throughout the platform, that you can enable multiple different governance models, so that you can enable multiple different team structures with multi-workspace structures, single workspace structures, all that good stuff. I'm not going to double click into all of that, right? But if you have any questions, reach out to your Databricks team. I'm sure they can provide a ton of resources for you on each of these individual pieces of how we can help meet them and how we can help evolve your standards for domain ownership, for data as a product, for self-service, and for governance. So just kind of want to show you this a little bit to kind of get a picture of what we're talking about when we talk about data as a product, when we talk about data domains. Right here on the left, you see all your source data. We have a ton of different data sets coming in, right? A lot of large enterprises, a lot of these data sets too are extremely siloed, right? When we start talking about, most manufacturing companies, when we start talking about financial services, when we start talking about state and local government, we see a lot of wonderful data sets that, when shared together, provide these deep products, right? Going back to my example earlier, we could have something like a clickstream data, right? So data from a website coming in, you get marketing use cases out of that. You get supply chain use cases out of that. You get potentially repair use cases out of that. You get customer loyalty, and you get all kinds of wonderful use cases you can get out of that data set. But you have to have other data sets combined with it to make it worthwhile, right? You need to know, okay, if you want to do something here with that wonderful clickstream data, and you're trying to figure out how to get products in the right places where they need to be, well, that data needs to be joined with your supply chain lines, right? So data products are complicated, right? They're segmented. There's domains at this side of the equation, the source data side of the equation, right? And then there's domains at the serving side of the equation as well. So when you combine all those data sets together, they're going to be beneficial to certain teams, right? So when you combine all that data together and it provides a good use case where you need to figure out where to get products to, that's a supply chain use case. You might want to go to your supply chain team, right? Or maybe you get all that data together and it gives you some really good insights into your financial outlook for the next quarter, for customer turnover, right? Well, maybe that needs to go to your finance teams and your accounting teams. So lots of different data sets can be combined in different ways to meet different domain needs on both sides of this equation, on the source and on the destination, right? Excuse me, sorry. The allergies in Texas right now in the fall, so bear with me. Here we have just a high level of some of the 5 core processes that we're taking into account when we're talking about domain-specific data production, data publishing, data consumption, and then some of the domain agnostic pieces, right, which is our governance, which is our scaling the platform and everything. And I want to point these out because these are going to come into our structure here in a second about how we normally see organizations kind of laying out. Again, these aren't the same for everywhere. There's all kinds of different variations of how we do computational governance, or there's all kinds of different variations on how we have platform teams organized, or how we have data production teams organized. So your mileage may vary across the board. I've never seen 2 organizations that were exactly the same, but this is to get an idea for some of the frameworks that we have in place, right? So often we see these 2 domain agnostic things in some sort of platform area, and the domain specific things in our various different domains in some separated fashion, some pieces and products in different areas and in various degrees. So just seeing again, Databricks Lakehouse is a data mesh. Just wanted to help visualize this again. We were talking about this already in the earlier slide where we showed Databricks has all the capabilities to enable a data mesh. So when we see that, we have our centralized governance model here with unique catalog, and then we enable our data domains in a normal use case. We have various Databricks workspaces that consume data and provide insights, provide data products, right? And you have a lot of those, and they all come into play together. So we're going to start building, again, this kind of graph here, this kind of graph on the right that we're going to see throughout the whole place. Okay, so data mesh sounds pretty awesome, right? This sounds great. Sounds like this. Yeah, let's go do that. Let's go get a data mesh in place. We want all of our data domains to have all the data here. We want to mix all that data together, and then we want to have all these great insights. But in reality, things are more complicated than that, right? In reality, what we see is, domains are not often prepared to be fully federated. What I mean by that is all of these various domains have different levels of maturity. So domain 1 might have tons of really good data engineers, but no data scientists. Domain 2 might have tons of great data scientists, no data engineers. Domain 1 might have a really good understanding of their data models. And they don't have an ability though yet to share that out, right? They don't have those capabilities. They don't have full master data management. They don't have lineage. They don't have all these capabilities, but they have a really good handle on what their data means, right? Other groups might be really, really good at publishing that information out, right? And getting that information to the whole organization so that they know, but maybe their data is not as clean as it needs to be. So there's all kinds of different varying degrees of data maturity, whether that comes from the people or whether that comes from the process, or various other pieces and the sundries of information and kind of how organizations work and process. And then we have various degrees of understanding of the internal processes, which is also incredibly important here, right? Are all of your internal processes published to a degree that everybody knows how to get what where? Does everybody know where the data catalog is? Does everybody know how to use the data catalog? Does everybody know how to take that data catalog and use their destination data and trace it back to the source? Does everybody actually need to do that? Does everybody understand their data security, data compliance requirements? In most organizations, no, right? It's very, very hard to get that kind of centralized foundational piece of understanding the processes, as well as understanding the tools that are available to achieve those processes, right? So an ideal data mesh here assumes shared data governance responsibilities. So all of these data governance responsibilities are shared in each domain, but enterprises often centralize that data governance piece. Going back to my slide earlier, kind of saw that a little bit, kind of started on that. Governance and platform pieces are often centralized a little bit, right? What is the one source of truth for your data governance? Typically, that's a centralized location, but sometimes there is splitting and splintering in various domains who have some decentralized control over data governance. And then we have one extra fun layer to this, external domains, right? So partners and customers. That offers one extra layer of complexity. When we start talking about all of our wonderful, great partners coming in and having access to our data, and some of our customers, remember data is a product, so we're going to sell that externally. They also have to comply with our data access standards, for example, our data sharing standards, for example, right? It's really, really important here to take into account the reality, kind of see how we might bridge the gap to that ideology of the data mesh, right? So again, getting into a bit of a graphic here to kind of show these two different visualizations of the world, right? In a perfect world, we have this kind of super harmonized, true data mesh where every node's connected to each other. They all share data freely and independently, and everything just kind of works nicely. On the right is a bit of a more realistic model of kind of this hybrid nature, where there's some centralization of governance, there's some centralization of publishing data products, and there's some centralization of publishing the various details about that data, the metadata on that data. And these do offer external sharing too. So, and there's various degrees of where that external sharing comes from. That external sharing could be shared out on multiple nodes. That external sharing could just come from that central model. So again, this is kind of just a reference diagram to get an idea, but that external sharing could come from anywhere. Or that global hub might be a little bit closer to one of those little spokes, might be a little bit closer tied to that global hub, right? So what do we see in reality? In reality, we kind of see this, right? We see some new data domains, and then we have mature data domains at varying degrees of maturity. Here I showed 2 stages of maturity. In reality, data maturity curve is much more broad than that, right? There's a lot more aspects to data maturity, but just for the simple visualization here, imagine we have immature and mature. Nothing's that really separated, but to get an idea, we need to focus a little bit of our time and energy into those new data domains, right? We need to get those new data domains up to speed in order to get them in our data mesh concept, right? And really, we're never going to achieve a perfect world where all new data domains are going to be just perfectly mature. There's no such thing as perfectly mature. That line's always moving. So we're never going to achieve this in reality, right? But the goal is to get closer and closer and closer to this state of perfection, right? So what are some of the steps that we can do to get to those pieces? How can we help enable these? How can we take some of these concepts that we've shared from this data mesh concept and get closer and closer to the state of perfection? Okay, so some of the challenges. Scaling is hard, right? When we start talking about all these different things, scaling is tough, not just tools, the process, and people. Domains aren't mature enough to be fully federated. The ideal data mesh assumes shared governance responsibilities, and it's a two-way street, right? Data is shared to domains and between domains, and domains need to share the value back. So your platform teams also have to have a really good understanding of the value. And that piece I want to stress a lot here. This going back to our visualization here, right? Oftentimes these data domains don't share what they're doing back to the platform teams, back to the global hubs, back to the central teams. So the global teams don't know how to prioritize their next steps. They don't know how to prioritize who to help next. They don't know how to prioritize what they should be maturing on. It's really, really important to say, whether that's a dollar figure, whether that's a security figure, whether that's a auditability figure. There's all kinds of situations here where there's quantifiable metrics that we can provide back and forth through these different domains and central hubs. So what does scale really look like, right? Again, just kind of going through this customer journey to see how we start and how we can start scaling. So when we look at this, the initial, right, we start with a couple different scenarios, a couple different BUs, business units, and then we start getting to multiple BUs. We start enabling all these BUs with some of the topics we're going to talk about here in a second with centers of enablement. And then here, when we're truly federated, we're going to get to this true data mesh model. We're going to get to this model where, again, separate domains are out here, maybe a centralized hub, some level of that. Again, we know we're not going to get to the perfect state. You'll notice this is asymptotic, right? So here, we'll talk about some of these steps that we can do and some of the processes that we can do in the different stages of a project or business unit or a domain lifecycle to get closer and closer to move that needle, right? Okay, so as an organization, how might we effectively prioritize, provide a process to help people, maintain security, educate, and then measure? Measure, right? We're sitting here talking about data culture. So the whole time, all of our insights, everything that we need to do needs to be data driven, right? We're going to eat our own dog food here. Okay. So again, just referencing this, I'll come back to it. We're going to double click here into our individual domain. And let's look at one of those, what one of those looks like. So how do we define and measure our data journey? So there's quite a bit of information on this slide. But what I want to stress here is underneath it all, you have governance and security, right? That's through and through all life cycle. You have to start with governance and security, and you have to continue with governance and security. The most important thing. That's not a static line, right? As you move on through things, your governance and security gets better and better. You start having more governance and security capabilities, and that helps you, that reduces your governance overhead and enables you to scale even more, right? But really, we kind of see 3 main cycles of a project, right? We have our evaluation stages. So we're going to determine, do we want to do this? Does this make sense? Your POCs, your MVPs, your evaluation with executives, your discovery into it. You have to do some data discovery to see if this is even possible, right? Do we have the data capabilities to do what we want to do to provide this value for the business, this thing that the business keeps asking for? Then the next step is, well, let's hit the ground running, right? We have this thing that we know works. Let's go do stuff with it. Let's deploy it to production. And deploying it to production means a couple of different things, right? That means we need to fully onboard. We need to bring all of our team members on board. We need to commit resources. We need to hit the ground running. As team members, we need to scale up, right? We need to make sure that we have all the skills in place to do what we want to do, right? The business wants to do something new, and we have some data set, but we don't have the skills yet to do that. Then it's our job as a business to come in and do all the learnings, self-learnings, do all the trainings, do all the workshops, right? Of course, Databricks provides a ton of those things. So feel free to reach out again to your SAs or your CSEs and ask for all that information, because that's what we're here for. But ultimately it's on the entire organization together to collectively learn, right? And we start developing, right? We develop and we learn and we develop and we learn, and then we productionize, right? So that means we make sure that we have this in a state that if it ever goes down, we can get it back up in the time that we need it to get back up in the SLAs that the business needs. Really, really key piece there is within the SLAs that the business needs. If the business only uses this once per month, do we care if it's up 24/7? Probably not, right? That being said, if the business looks at this daily and it's making automated decisions on a sub-second level or something crazy like that, do we need to make sure that this stays up for every single second? Yeah, we do. So paying attention to those SLAs is really, really key in planning for everything moving forwards. So that kind of ties into this last piece, this value creation, this justification, and this understanding of best practice and being able to combine everything together and go back and be able to develop, tighten up those SLAs, clean up your processes, make your version 2s, that type of thing. You'll notice this arrow at the top. This is a cycle, right? It doesn't end at advocacy. It doesn't end when you start monitoring it. As we all know, projects last forever, right? Best case scenario, the good projects do at least. That's how we optimize. That's how we improve our data quality. That's how we improve everything. So, that's all fine and dandy. We know what the journey looks like for an individual project, an individual business unit, an individual domain. This applies at all different levels here. How do we do each of these individual things though, right? That's not easy, right? And then how do we do them at scale? How do we do them when we have 10 domains, right? I might be a part of one domain, but my data engineering benefits 4 other data domains. What does that mean to me, right? Maybe I'm in charge of one domain, and my domain only benefits one other domain. What does that look like? I'm part of a platform team, so I'm important to every single domain, right? I have to manage the governance. What does that mean across the board? What are some of the things that we need to improve all of the processes in place? So first and foremost, intake processes, right? This is a wall of text. I'm not going to read it all out, but really the key is have these be defined, right? Define what are the roles of your central and platform team? What is the roles of your federated team, right? And then, okay, if you are the central and platform team, you need to make sure this is published. If you're a federated team, a domain, you need to make sure that you have a good understanding of what the central and platform teams enable, right? So it's really key to, as an organization, as an individual contributor, as a manager, to have a good understanding of what are the capabilities of your domains, of your central hubs, of all of these different areas. And then also incorporate, of course, your wonderful partners. Again, another plug for our SAs and CSEs out there. They are doing a great job to help you with these things, right? You're not on an island, right? So if you have questions about your intake process, if you have questions about how might we do this, absolutely happy to help with all of those, right? See this at tons of different organizations. So we can kind of help bring things from across the board, bring things from the entire industry, bring things from the entire globe, really, and start talking about, oh, this really worked here. Let's try this process. Have you read this article? This thing's really great. We have some tried and true processes around how we do introductions and how we make sure that we have centers of excellence with various team members. So there's all kinds of really, really good processes here. One of the things I want to stress is make sure this is well communicated. So we're going to get into this in a second, but set up a calendar cadence for your intake processes, right? Have architecture council, have business value councils internally that go through and start setting measurables around these things that meet on a regular basis and take in and then give advice and start disseminating information. Onboarding process, this part's the fun part, right? This part's where you get to go and play with the tools and have some fun. So I'm not going to go super in depth into this part, but this includes the whole team, right? You got alignment across all your pillars. Once you have alignment, you validated everything's good to go, then hit the ground running. Start your development in Databricks, of course, and do all your data engineering, do all your fun development, do all your learning, and then go get this out to production. There's a lot of different players here to make sure that everything's going well, but really this is about keeping that ball rolling, right? Go live, this is very, very key, right? Having go live, having change management, having HADR recommendations is really, really key here. So augment this by your experts, right? The experts have seen what can go wrong and they can help you identify and prevent that from happening. They will warn you about potholes coming up. They will let you know, hey, if you do it like this, it'll help with this or help you meet this SLA, or this process will improve your data quality. Here's the estimated cost benefit analysis for this if you want to go with this route, to really optimize to your performance needs, your SLAs, your requirements, your domains requirements, or your customers' requirements, right? Okay, and then value creation. Again, we touched on this a little bit. This is really, really important as an organization to communicate value creation as an individual, as a group, as a team, as a domain. This has to happen across the board. You need to be able to have chargeback models. You need to be able to have all these capabilities, not just for the tools that you're using, right? How much does this cost, right? But also for the value that you as an individual or you as a team are contributing, right? We did this, and this. We did these tasks that made this go, right? Those things, being able to quantify them with your DevOps tool sets, with your project tracking tool sets, are extremely important. And then taking that and providing business value justification with not just your hard costs, but also your soft costs is really, really, really important. That's a big piece that we're focused on at Databricks, is reducing some of those soft costs, is focusing on those value add places where you can hit a solution, hit the ground running, and get immediately to that business value add as soon as possible, right? Okay, and then data governance and access. This is across the board, right? We need to have all these capabilities in place, or we can't do anything else. I should have led with this one. I'll make a note to move this one a little bit earlier, but don't start an ML solution without ML ops in mind, right? Don't start a reporting solution without your end report. Don't start a data engineering workload without your end report in mind, for example, right? Make sure that you have audit and regulatory compliance. Make sure that you have all of your PII capabilities in place to anonymize. Make sure that you have all of your cost management and reporting planned out and ready to go, right? It's not going to be 100%. It never will be. We've already talked about this. There's no perfect world. But at least start, right? At least get that start in place. At least get that foundation in place. Get the process in place for, here's my cost management strategy. If it needs to be amended, here's what you do to act. When something new comes up to it, this is what you need to do. And just a brief blurb, even like that, in a knowledge base is extremely strong to help your organization. Okay, and just again, kind of pulling everything together to see what a COE's building blocks are. There's a lot of pieces here, right? There's the architecture and technology and the strategy and the people and the data and the operations and processes, moving pieces everywhere. So having a good handle and a good understanding of all of these various pieces is important for everybody in an organization. Okay, again, going back to calendars, right? At Databricks, we drive heavily to make sure that when we're talking about enablement, we're talking about it on a somewhat regular basis. We saw that all these domains come on, right? Each domain comes online in different stages of the life cycle, different levels of maturity. So what's the best way to tackle those? What I've seen in a lot of organizations is that having that help from the experts is extremely beneficial to get that extra lift, that extra level of guidance, right? And that's through things like office hours. That's through things like working directly with the experts. That's through things like connecting your internal data domain experts to the internal customers of those domains, right? Just making sure that there's a platform available. And when I say a platform, I mean a place to talk, a round table, where people can discuss these things, will naturally lead itself to all of these teams, no matter what your organizational structure is, being able to have those conversations across the board, being able to start those conversations, start building those processes, and identifying where those next new capabilities need to come. And then the best part of that too is once you start identifying those and talking about those, you can start measuring them as well. You can start talking about, how do we measure this? How do we prioritize our next steps? So just a brief example activity plan over kind of a larger scale, right, is be a little bit proactive about this, right? To start building out in these sessions, you'll get a good picture when they first start out of what you need, right? People will come to the table, they'll have asks, they'll have needs, they'll have requirements. From those, you can start building out your activity plan over time. We'll be able to get to this, this, and this in this quarter, and we'll have to move these out to the next quarter. It's simple project planning, but at a broader scale, at a strategic scale across different data domains. It's really, really important to have that. It's really, really important as individuals, as groups, as data domains, to be a part of these conversations, to be a part of knowing what's next. Hey, if there's a workload in a different silo in a different data domain to mine, but I've done a lot of this before, I'm a domain knowledge expert in this domain, perhaps you can provide a lot of insights. So how do you start broadcasting that? And that's by using tools like this. That's by using processes like activity plan that are published, that are shared. That's by using office hours and roundtables that are published and shared to share that information, share that domain knowledge. You might see this and think, oh, that's perfect for me. I have something that I can bring to habit prediction. I've done this before. I can help out in that workload. Let me go reach out to the people included. Okay. And of course, the wonderful tools that Databricks provides as well. So, there's various different things like this, like what we're doing right now, right? Data culture enablement discussions, like regular weekly talks, like your Spark summits, your Data and AI summits, your local lunch and learns, your local summits, and various different processes and procedures, as well as your account teams, to help out on a pretty regular basis, but to make sure that you're getting the help that you need from a learning capability standpoint, from a best practice recommendation standpoint. So again, how do I move the needle? And this is just about to close it up. Got questions after this, so we'll open it up here in a second to questions, but just kind of want to talk about how do we move the needle in our various different roles and responsibilities? Why does this matter to me? Well, everybody needs to be a data culture champion across the board. As an organization, be a data culture champion. And that means a lot of things, right? That means maybe you're a governance champion. You don't have to be all of the different roles. You don't have to be a unicorn. But in your respective domain, your respective field of interest, if you're a manager, in your team, you be a champion for that team. Be a champion for your area of interest. Be a champion for your specialties, right? And this is key. Define and publish processes to stop that data mesh from becoming a data mess. So again, remember we talked about data mesh being this kind of idealized thing that's really, really hard to achieve, if even possible, right? More realistically, we're going to have some hybrid or amalgamized data mesh, right? How do we stop that from being a mess? Well, we need to publish all of these processes. All of this information needs to be readily available for everybody, right? In your organization, whose responsibility is it to publish all this information? It's everybody's responsibility. It's a classic paradox, right? That people often think that if it's everybody's responsibility, then it's nobody's responsibility, right? So the real key there is know that it's your responsibility, right? Every single individual, it's key to, if you notice something's not publish it, right? So it's kind of overcoming human nature here. So just make sure that all of these different processes, all these different procedures, all these different classifications and metadata information, all of that good stuff is available for everybody to see in an open platform. And of course, making all that available, using Unicatalog to do all of your cataloging, and using that singular platform where you could do cross workspace analysis, cross domain analysis, is extremely important moving forwards. And then eat your own dog food, right? Use your data to tell a story, to quantify your success or identify when you need to pivot. So that's the ability to monitor. That's the ability to understand that, okay, I'm tagging all my Databricks clusters, I'm tagging all my jobs, I'm tagging all my workspaces. I know exactly how much everything costs, broken down by project. Awesome. Okay. Now I can say how much each project costs, right? But then I'm going to add one extra piece to that, and that's the business value component of it. I want to know, okay, how much business value is this creating? If that business value number is smaller than that cost number, well, then we probably need to pivot a little bit, right? Most of the time it's not often that that's the case, right? But it does happen sometime, and that's a situation where, okay, now we need to reprioritize and maybe help a different area of the business as a platform team, or maybe as a domain team, we need to focus on a new workload, a net new workload. So constantly be measuring yourself, constantly be reevaluating, and constantly be using all of these governance and platform capabilities that are built in and ready to go to make decisions, to prioritize your time, because your time is your most valuable asset when it really comes down to it. So anything that you can do to spend less time doing something is extremely beneficial. All right, so that pretty much covers from a high level some of these concepts. Again, a little bit more conceptual today, a little bit more how high level, not just how do I use Databricks to get something done. It's also how do I use Databricks to enable and foster a culture throughout my organization. How do I use Databricks to enable and foster a culture across my various data domains? So I'm just going to open up to questions here. I think the use case here is raise your hand and you can speak, or feel free to ask in chat.
All right, well, it looks like you did a great job. Everything was clear. No questions are needed. Thanks everybody for joining. We will send out the recording afterwards. Oh, we do have a question. Oh, great job. There's a question that says great job. Okay, so everybody have a great day. We'll send out the recording afterwards. Thanks.
Thank you.